Hello and welcome to the Trusted Professional Podcast, provided by the New York State Society of Certified Public Accountants. I'm Calvin Harris Jr., CPA, and Chief Executive Officer of the Society, and I'm honored to be your host. This podcast is provided by NYCPA, where I interview leaders in the accounting profession in New York and beyond, as well as those who influence this space. For this episode, I'm excited to present an interview with Michael Durant, an experienced New York CPA with a JD who specializes in estates and trusts. But before we get to Michael, let's discuss some of the news of the day. Starting with some exciting news coming through the society itself. By the time you hear this, we're either going to be the day of or shortly after our Moynihan Scholarship Fund Gala in Syracuse, New York. That's scheduled for Thursday, July the 25th. At the Sky Armory. If you missed it, it's not too late to support the scholarship because next year, 2025, is the 10th anniversary of the Scholarship Fund. It's named after past president, the late, great David Moynihan, and we were excited to honor the family, the Bonadillo Group, and past board presidents Joe Falbo and J. Michael Kirkland. Also coming up in society news will be on August the 21st, when we'll have CPA at the Yankees. Essentially, we will have the New York Yankees and Cleveland Guardians, where we'll have a special section devoted to the CPAs. You can get tickets on the State Society website, and we hope to see you there. Lastly, on the society side, I want to talk about our benevolent fund. The society has a fund that provides short-term assistance for daily living expenses that some members may find difficult, whether it's due to unemployment, an accident affecting personal or family health, medical expenses, or even a national disaster, such as we had just last week at the time of our recording. You can see more information on the Benevolent Fund at our website, NYSSCPA.org. Now to some news outside of the society. First, I want to reiterate the exciting information that came from the NYCPA National Pipeline Advisory Group. One of our own members, who I mentioned just a few moments ago, past President Joe Falbo, sits on that 22-member advisory group. They were formed last summer, just over a year ago, and they came up with 6 broad strategies for improving talent within the profession. Those 6 items are for us to create a more engaging college experience for accounting majors and potential majors, to reduce the time and cost of education, to grow support and increase that support for CPA exam candidates, to expand access for underrepresented groups, to also transform employer cultures and business models, and lastly, to tell a more compelling story about careers in accounting. Obviously, that last one is very much one of the things we strive for here on the podcast. You can see that draft report online through the NYCPA. Just look up NPAG for National Pipeline Advisory Group in your search browser, and you can see that report. Next, I want to talk about an article from Accounting Today, where they noted that an IRS advisory group is recommending regulating tax preparers. An influential IRS advisory committee is asking Congress to regulate non-credentialed tax preparers and to boost funding for the IRS and the National Taxpayer Advocate. The IRS's Electronic Tax Administration Advisory Committee released that annual report very recently, and it included 3 vital recommendations to Congress, along with 9 other recommendations directly for the IRS. The recommendations to the IRS include enabling interface access to taxpayer information, to remove barriers to electronic filing by developing an alternative to the current self-select PIN, as well as promoting greater information sharing between the IRS, states, and industry partners. You can see this article and more on the Accounting Today website. Also, we wanted to note a press release from the Comptroller's Council from earlier in July, as a scholarship fund was launched to expand the CPA pipeline, which we just talked about a little earlier from the exciting work of the NYCPA Pipeline Advisory Group. But this new initiative through the Comptroller's Council seeks to support the CPA pipeline with scholarships for students sitting for the CPA exam. The fund is a program from the Comptroller's Council but also administered by the AICPA Foundation. Controllers for a Cause is a program focused on the CPA shortage and building awareness of the amazing CPA career options in both public and corporate accounting, stated Neil Brown, the Controllers Council Executive Director. We would suggest you go look that up on their website, which is controllerscouncil.org, and look up Controllers for a Cause CPA Scholarship Fund. Kudos to them for enhancing our pipeline. Lastly, from the IRS warns that 28E still governs cannabis, even though some companies say it doesn't apply to them. This is through NYCPA Trusted Professional magazine. Because the IRS recently issued a reminder to taxpayers that cannabis remains a Schedule I controlled substance, and under the Internal Revenue Code, cannabis businesses may not receive, in quotes, deductions or credits for any amount paid or incurred, in quotes, in carrying out their business. Now, in May, you may recall, the U.S. Department of Justice started the process of reclassifying cannabis as a less dangerous drug that would reclassify it as a Schedule III drug from its current classification as a Schedule I drug under the Controlled Substance Act. It's not fully in place yet, and while the IRS took note of the action by the Justice Department, they also noted that until a final rule is published, marijuana remains a Schedule I controlled substance and is subject to limitations of the Internal Revenue Code. Now, why is this important? Given the status of cannabis in New York State, different legal status than federally, CPAs and firms operating in the space need to be mindful of making sure that they are doing things appropriately both on the state and the federal level, because this can often be an area of question. But the federal part, just a reminder, still has not yet changed. Now, with those articles now provided, we now want to switch over to our interview and welcome Michael Durant.
I am very excited to welcome to the Trust Professional Podcast, Michael Durant. Michael Durant is an experienced CPA with a JD specializing in estates and trusts. Michael's dedication to empowering his clients through education is mirrored by his passion for advancing financial literacy throughout the state, which is also something the society is very interested in. By serving as a member of the board of NYSSCPA, a trustee for a Moynihan Scholarship Fund, and a member of society's legislative task force, Michael's been able to merge his career and passion to further the empowerment of the community. Michael, welcome. I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you, Calvin, for having me.
I want to jump right into it because you've got an exciting background and you have an amazing story we're excited to share. But I'd like to start with your origin story of sorts. What was your journey into the field of accounting?
So my journey was trying to run away from it. So when I started out in high school, I always thought I'd be a mechanic. My grandfather owned a trucking mechanic garage for large semi-trucks, and I'd always thought that was the job. My grandfather always seemed to have time and seemed to enjoy his job, and I was like, entrepreneurship, running a family business, that'll be it. And then I figured I'd just go to trade school, become a mechanic, and move into the family business. And then in high school, the National Academy Foundation and their Academy of Finance program visited our class. They talked about taking extra classes, which to any high school student doesn't sound exciting, especially when I was more focused on working at the time in fast food. But then they mentioned how much money potentially the career could make in such a short amount of time and how much interns were paid. And it was just only 50 cents above minimum wage, but it was 50 cents was all you needed to offer me.
Well, every little bit matters. So it sounds like you got exposure early. And I think that's a real key part of people staying engaged. So you've done so much. So how do you stay motivated in your career?
Well, I think it's finding success in all that we do. On the technical side, it's you learn something new, take on something difficult, and you realize you're able to do it. Yeah, once you do it once, it's almost like an addictive drug. You just want to keep having success. On the work that I do with the society and my other organizations, it's mostly around the impact you feel or hear about years later. Having a student or a mentee come to you and say, I passed my CPA exam, or graduated with my bachelor's or my master's, or got hired at a firm that they were really looking forward to. Those accomplishments keep reminding you that you can make it easier than you had it coming into the profession.
Yeah. That's such an important point that I think can't be said too many times, because so many of us had various challenges in getting into the profession. And much like to your point, I think it's important for us, particularly once we've been through it, to try to make the path a little easier for folks. And I always like to say, we're not talking about lowering the bar. That there are challenges of entry, natural challenges, such as going through the exam and the experience. But we don't have to make it so it's hard. Particularly if it was hard for us to get into the profession, that might mean that there's an opportunity to do better. I think similar to that, you do some amazing things, and it sounds like you're really excited about what you do. You find it interesting, but I am curious, what do you find so rewarding about your work, about whatever work you do?
For me, it was just the difference between where I was and my peers, and being able to bridge that gap for every generation after me. So this profession is all about the language of business and economics and money and how things work. And it's really a bridge into creating wealth when you're able to go to a client, which may have modest income, but start helping them plan, give them insight into, hey, same way we do with kids. And we say, don't get credit cards when you go to college. That insight probably stopped so many generations since we started that campaign from going into debt. And so now this career has been a next step for me in being able to educate the next generation, or even the current generation, on the next steps in life, so that they don't have to make so many missteps. And I think that's where social media comes in just a little bit, the credibility problem, but I think it does help spread information faster.
Yeah, it seems like it can spread both good and not so good information out there. But I admittedly am a big fan of the power of social media, just engaging people. I certainly see you as someone who's taken advantage of it as well. But one thing that does happen, at least with me, in social media, it can sometimes blur the line between the personal and the professionals. And I'm curious for you, when it comes to balance, we always like to talk about work-life balance, or the challenges of doing. How do you balance your work and life with volunteering? How do you do that?
I think for me, it has been knowing what I enjoy doing. So before I got into this profession, before I started with the society, I left high school going into college knowing that the experience I had learning, budgeting, finance, working at KPMG, I knew that experience right there was different than any other student or peer that I had at that time that hadn't gone through it, and I wanted to give that back. So that was something I graduated high school with. And I had gone back as an alumni of the program of Academy Finance and worked with students in presentations, and even with the State Society, we certainly partnered with them. That was a passion before. So when I'm volunteering, whether it be with the Moynihan Scholarship Fund, whether it be with the career day, that's something I would have done regardless. So I don't see that as work, or volunteerism. It's just what I would enjoy doing. There is the work of being a board member and a volunteer, and there's a lot of that. And that's about managing, it's leveraging, where I want to do those other things. And for me to be at the forefront of those other things and make more opportunity for those other things, leadership and being on the board and doing the heavy lift is what's required.
I agree for sure. I'm curious, when you go to those high schools, how do you describe accounting to them? I usually talk about, I usually make a point of avoiding numbers sometimes for those students who aren't good at math. But I'm curious, when you go to those high schools, what do you find resonates best with high school students?
Exactly that. So I try to focus more on the consulting side, because whether you're an auditor or whether you're a tax person, you are doing consulting before you start the work. You're going in there like, what are the issues you're having? Where do you see your business can improve and grow? The clients become your friends, so you naturally start to help them grow their business. And that's all consulting. And yes, there's a busy season. Yes, there's deadlines. Every job has one, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a lawyer, banker, everybody has compliance issues and nobody likes compliance. But it's the other work we do. It's the work we do outside of the deadlines. It's the work we do where our passion meets our profession. If you're someone who really enjoys animals, this is a career where you can have your own firm just based on servicing farms or vets or animal shelters, whatever you so desire. You can create a business around your passion.
That's so very true. And it's funny you make the point on busy times. In a recent conference that we were at, you were there as well. I was having a conversation with a colleague on this very point on how important our storytelling is, and not to sugarcoat the tough times, but sometimes I think we lean into those tough times a little hard and we pretend like other professions don't also have times that are busy. A doctor might be up at all hours of the day if they're a surgeon, and that's part of their job. A lawyer may spend the vast majority of their time researching items. It seems to me, admittedly outside looking in, I've only been an accountant. It seems like they do a much better job than accounting on telling their own story and making sure that they emphasize the exciting times. The lawyers, you think of one of my favorite movies, A Few Good Men, they show the exciting time of the confrontations in the courtroom and a lot less time on the weeks. Although that movie did show it a little bit, the weeks that they spend of preparation. And that's what so many jobs are, is that preparation time that doesn't end up on the screen. When you're talking to students, how do you talk about when it comes to those busy times or rough times if they ask you about it?
I compare it to finals. Would you give up
Right.
your entire year of hanging out with your friends in school and all the good times you had just because you have to take a final at the end of the year? And that's pretty much how our job is. You have finals and midterms, April and September. These are the times that we have. And in reality, when you compare it to that, whether the student is in high school, in college, or in their career, it's going to be the same situation. You will always have these finals and these midterms and these deadlines. And that's just work. And if you want the freedom and the ability to have this type of career when you have so much control, once you get the technical expertise, you end up having a lot more control over your life than a lot of other places.
For sure. That is so true. I would think that resonates pretty well with a younger group, particularly when you were talking a little earlier about social media, and you'll see so many influencers that are working, at least online, it appears to be. They're working part-time or doing this here, or they're doing a lot of consulting work. So I would imagine that when you talk to a younger person and you talk about the flexibility that being an accountant, that being a CPA, it resonates pretty well. You've seen that to be the case when you talk to them?
It certainly is. And everybody wants to be an entrepreneur now. And what they don't see is this profession as being an entrepreneurship. That's all this is. It's no matter what job you go into, you want to be an entrepreneur and own your own clothing brand. You need some type of work in the clothing industry to develop those contacts, to develop that knowledge of manufacturing and shipping and all of that. And yeah, you can teach yourself all on the side. Doesn't mean you'll be particularly good at anything for quite a long time. You can skip a lot of hurdles when you are educated by someone. That's why we send people to school. And this profession is an apprenticeship. It's just not marketed that way. And I think we need to do a better job. And I believe that the work that the society does on making podcasts and showing the difference of what a real accountant is, not only accountant or CPAs, not only just online saying how great their job is, but you never see them doing any work. Here you have a bunch of professionals that are highlighted, that are respected by their peers, that are not only shown in their firms, small, big, medium, large, but also shown in Auburn, in Syracuse, in Buffalo, at Binghamton, all throughout the state.
That's very well said, and certainly one of our goals here on the Trusted Professional Podcast is absolutely to highlight those individuals, those members like yourself, that are doing some really interesting and amazing things that within the profession we may know about, although sometimes we don't remember that either, but certainly the general public doesn't have a great feel for. We talked about the society just a moment ago, and you're one of our most valued leaders. We talked about the various entities that you're a part of. I know you're doing a little more than what we've been talking about. Why did you join society leadership? Why do you stay involved with society leadership?
It's about making a difference and opening the door, and not to sound cliche, but exactly what I said earlier about making it easier for the next person to come in. And it's not necessarily about lowering the bar. And at society leadership, we're not advocating for decreasing anything. In fact, all we're asking for is shine a light on this profession and how great it is. Let's shy away from the busy season talk and the stress of the exam. I took the bar exam and I passed.
Very recently, I believe. Congratulations.
Thank you. You hear attorneys talk about their career. Not everyone says the bar exam sucked and that was it. One conversation. Right. Everything else is about how much they've been able to do in their careers. Most people know attorneys because they tend to focus their career on how much they help their clients. We're there more often than most other professionals in a client's life, especially if they're a business owner, where they're on a monthly basis. At least for most people, we're there annually. We're the most trusted profession. And so being a part of society's leadership is about highlighting those other things, making sure that the society is promoting all our professionals throughout the state. As someone who spent years upstate during elementary school and middle school, I know how great upstate is and how beautiful it is compared to someone who was originally from the city and who currently lives in the city. And I love the city, but there are different things throughout this state, and highlighting, no matter where you live in this state, this profession and this society is part of your career, part of your life.
Yeah, that's very well said. We were a big group, but you and I included, we're just upstate in the Adirondacks. It's absolutely beautiful. And I'm biased, but it doesn't mean I'm wrong, that New York is just an amazing state. There are things that are literally only in New York that you can't get elsewhere. We're not just talking about New York City, obviously. We're talking about the Adirondacks. We're talking about Niagara Falls, amazing places here and there that people don't always remember exist in this state. But our upstate area, certainly in land mass, but also in population, which is roughly 25% of our overall CPA population, overall CPA membership. But that area alone, because New York is such a big state, is still bigger than most states of the union. So sometimes we even here downstate in the city and surrounding areas have to remember how vital our upstate area is to things we have going on. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Let me ask a quick thought experiment, if you don't mind, because we talked about ways we can engage younger people. If someone's listening to the podcast now and they want to be more involved with students or high school students or college students or anyone locally, what would you suggest they do? You've made this such a clear part of what you do, which I thank you. It seems like there aren't that many people who do what you do in the community and really live the talk. How would you suggest others get more involved with student engagement?
I would suggest it starts with figuring out what your passion is. So I like to use the animal example or the gym example. If that's what you love to do, then partner it with reaching out to students. So if you're someone who loves to work out and this is what you do, and hopefully you're someone who has clients who are in that space, they don't have to be a famous athlete. They can just be a gym owner that you can bring to the school and have them talk about how great having a CPA is. If you're someone who's into animals and you work with shelters or whatever, cafes that let you pet kittens all day, bringing the students to there and explaining, these are my clients. This is the business I help stay afloat. The people that stand behind the register, I make sure that their payments are processed on a regular finances. These are all the things we do if we aren't there. Behind the scenes, a lot doesn't happen, and showing the students that part. And again, it's the mirroring of it with your passion, because going to an office, seeing all the shiny walls and furniture and everything is great, but it looks like a job.
I think that's so true. I can recall a society event where we had a number of high schoolers engaged in that, having an amazing called World of Accounting of high school students, and there were a few hundred high school students. And it seemed to me the most popular person in the room was the FBI agent, who happened to be an accountant, who apparently been at a stakeout that evening. So he still had come straight from the stakeout to the event. He still had his sidearm and all that. And I tell you, they couldn't get enough of him. And you could just tell that for so many of them, and it seemed like this applies to adults from time to time as well, it never even occurred to them that a person that has an accounting background as a CPA could actually be an agent and do that kind of work. And I think it just keeps going to show on how, like you're already doing, it ends up being so critical to show all the different things that a person can do with a CPA and an accounting background. What's the most interesting question you've gotten from those high school students? I'll tell you mine, but I'm curious about yours. My interesting question was when I was at a group of students, and I had talked about how when I was in school, I actually was thinking about being an FBI agent. It actually was on my list. I was thinking about public accounting, and I was thinking about being an FBI agent, admittedly because I thought that what I now know is forensic accounting. But I thought that was very interesting to do that sort of work. And the question, I had let that slip during a discussion with some high schoolers, and they had asked me if I regretted making that decision, because they asked me to describe why I chose public accounting versus the FBI. I never interviewed that part; those would probably have been accepted. And my answer was essentially that a college professor had strongly suggested public, and the part that I was excited about, but I was a little worried about, was the amount of time you would spend outside of the office. For me, that was something I was actually afraid of. Now we're talking about many decades ago when working remotely is so common now. Working wherever you are is so common now. And I struggled to understand that. So the biggest question I had, the one I struggled with the most, and I even now don't have a great answer, why did you not pursue the FBI when I had an interest? So that was the question where I probably did more recruiting for the FBI that day than I did for the accounting firms. But I did say you still need to become a CPA. But have you had any question like that was a struggle?
I think the question that has come up the most, and it's probably most recent because of passing the bar and going to law school, has been if I was just going to law school, why get the CPA? And understanding that they are two different thought processes. One is more research-based, fact-finding, and the other one is more analytical. As a CPA, I have to help a client make business decisions and life decisions. A lot of emotion. Accounting has its black and white.
Yeah.
Tax has a little bit of gray.
Yeah.
But for the most part, our job involves looking at a full picture and not just what the facts are and how to apply the law. And so when I'm working with a client, having the CPA ability to not only look at what the client's showing, what the client's telling, but to be able to look through a lot of the things they're doing, the way they're spending, how they're spending, what they're spending on, who they're spending it with, and understanding the emotional component on top of it. The legal degree gives me the ability to go and do extensive research and communicate in a different way to help that client reach that goal. But I wouldn't be able to understand it without being able to read through the client's financials, read through the client's business processes. These are the things we do where we're more in the weeds, we're more understanding of the actual focus of the business or the client's financial situation and how it personally affects them and their family. And then trying to apply the law to get them to wherever they need to be.
That's an interesting point. So would I be right in assuming that's why what you just said there, that ends up being why you end up being both a JD and a CPA for that sort of holistic approach?
It's exactly why it's the holistic approach. It's being able to take the one side and also do the other side. And again, as a CPA, I don't necessarily practice law, but being able to understand the implications and communicate with the client's attorney at a level where we're speaking the same language, or at least understand the same language.
Right. It's understand, right?
It helps facilitate the client's plan a lot faster and usually a lot more affordable.
That's true. So the quick pivot, you have this unique background. We certainly have members, CPA members who have other credentials, CFE, CGMA, but we only have so many who are both JD and CPA. So I'm curious, which exam ended up being the more challenging one for you?
It certainly was the CPA exam, not knowing what the new design feels like. But
yeah,
the bar exam, it's one exam. You study for 2-3 months and you can take it.
Yeah.
And you can pass. The CPA exam, you study for 2-3 months just to pass FAR. You still got 3 more pieces to go.
You're just getting started. Fair point. Yeah, congratulations. Certainly, again, that gives you such a unique background that I think can only be beneficial to everyone along the way. What other things should I have asked you about that we haven't really talked about yet? You're obviously passionate profession. You clearly give back in ways that most people don't, both the high school and beyond. But what else is important that we should absolutely take a moment to talk about?
I think for the CPAs and the professionals listening, the one thing I think we should highlight on this podcast is what's my most memorable moment with the society.
Oh, let's hear it.
And setting aside the past,
I don't know the answer to this question either, so let's hear where it goes.
Setting aside my most recent experience at our most recent leadership conference, which by far I think was one of the best experiences I've had thus far. I think the best experience that we've had at the society has been holiday dinners and our activities. And the number one that comes to mind was a next gen happy hour that I believe was at Slate, and we had pool tables and all types of games going on. But we waited till the chapter leadership left the room. After they said their goodbyes, next gen just said, we're now going to have fun. And it was all good fun and very respectful. And it made lifelong friends. And that's one thing I think the society has definitely given me, is that I've had friends that I've had for well over 10 years since joining.
That's a great experience. I tell you what, we might have to find a way to get back there. Our next gen committee focused on our members and our leaders, 40 years and under, is a very vital part of the organization. And I'll say sometimes those who have aged out a bit, like myself, I've aged way out, will come in and give remarks, but it's a great opportunity for our younger members to engage with each other. Like yourself, we've had a number of amazing members and leaders that have come through Next Gen. Many are still in there. So certainly if you are not involved with that committee and you're in that age range, we would certainly encourage you to do. And to Michael's point, we're going to find a way to have another event like that where you won't have to wait for the chapter leaders to go. You'll just kick us out, and then get right to it. That sounds like a great time. Michael, I did have one last question because of your own background. We talk so much about getting people out there to meet students, and we talk about stories we tell. I happen to think that lawyers do extraordinary jobs of getting their stories out. You can think of countless movies and TV shows where the lawyer is the hero. A little hard pressed to do the same for CPAs. There are a few movies that come, and I got in trouble recently about talking badly about Ben Affleck before I had seen The Accountant. I actually saw the movie. Pretty good. Ben Affleck, if for some reason you're listening to the podcast, I'm sorry for what I said. I thought you did well. But considering how well lawyers are represented, what do you think we can do better as accountants, as CPAs, in getting our messaging a little tighter? What do you think we can do?
I think the lawyers have certainly pushed a lot and so have the bankers and the doctors. And they pushed a lot into Hollywood. They all have shows, whether it's Law and Order,
Yep.
House,
Yeah.
Billions, all
Yep.
these, they all have good marketing.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Yet none of those shows exist without accountants. And we need to write our story into them. I think that write our own stories and highlight the characters who aren't really behind the scenes, because I'm in the room with lawyers when they're making decisions. I'm pretty sure that FBI agent is in the room with the DA when they're going over the evidence.
Sure.
So I think we need to write better stories, write our own stories, and maybe get Michael Bay to direct 1 or 2 films. And look more at the long term. Do you think about things like Law and Order? It's not a box office hit. It's a long run show.
Yeah.
And everybody, if you never met a lawyer in your life, you know Law and Order.
Yeah.
So I think we need better marketing. And I think what we do best, or where we are most effective, is because we're in such constant contact with our clients, make it a little bit more than the deliverable.
I think that's a great point. It's a great point. And you're mentioning shows like Law and Order. It occurs to me right up to say, you know what? We actually are in these shows more often than not. It's just you may not realize. Here in New York, Law and Order, of course, is New York based. You'll see them there. But also in New York, very recently, I think over the last week, that there have been banners showing. For those who are Game of Thrones fans, there have been banners for the different houses showing up all over New York. That's a very New York thing. So those things show up. And it occurred to me, as you think about that, there's a position I think called Master of Coin that gets to sit on the small council and basically the accountant for the king. So we're actually usually in the room. We just don't always get portrayed that well. Maybe we can take your advice, Michael, and we'll get a little better at the marketing. Michael, I want to thank you very much for your time. It's been a great conversation. Everything you do is very inspiring for the profession, and we appreciate all you do. So thank you for joining me today on the Trust Professional Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed our interview with Michael Durant. As you no doubt noticed, Michael has a strong passion for our youth, especially those who are looking to join our great profession. Now, whether it's financial literacy or himself going out to meet students personally, he is an amazing example of what this profession can do. So thank you again to Michael for joining us on the Trusted Professional Podcast. Whether it's financial literacy or going out to students himself, Michael is a great example of what the profession can do. Thank you, Michael. And thank you for making it to this latest issue of the Trusted Professional Podcast, sponsored by NYCPA. If you like what you heard, please subscribe now to get this podcast delivered to you when it is released. And also, please do feel free to leave a review. In addition, if you aren't a current member of NYCPA, I ask you to learn about our events and join us at NYSSCPA.org and follow us on social media. I hope to have you join us here again in 2 weeks. Now, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for our podcast, please email us at podcast@nysscpa.org. Thanks for listening.